Hello, my name is Vishrut Shelat Esquire, and today I'll be describing a very common problem immigration lawyers face in the representation of their clients before EOR, otherwise known as the Executive Office of Immigration Review or Immigration Court. The problem I'm referring to is known as a crimmigration dispute. So what do I mean by crimmigration dispute? The word crimmigration, as the name refers to, is a combination of the word criminal and immigration, i.e. criminal law and immigration law. And this combination tends to be very common in asylum and deportation defense cases, where the government needs a valid reason in order to deport a non-citizen. The government cannot just deport a non-citizen just because they're a non-citizen. The non-citizen needs to commit a crime, typically a violation of a state or federal statute, that then allows the government to have a valid reason to begin removal proceedings before EOR. So let me give you a common example, let's say through an anecdote, which I feel is the best way to learn the law. So let's say you have a man named John. John is a citizen of the UK and he's decided he loves the US and he wants to visit America. John applies for a visa, i.e. a B2 visa, for 8 months and he stays in America during that time. He loves it, nothing goes wrong, etc. However, in all the fun he's having, John, like many people, forgets when his visa is expiring and he forgets to renew it. And in his mind, he's like, I haven't broken any laws, so I'm solid. I don't have to do anything. And his status changes from a legal non-immigrant to an undocumented immigrant. So now John is overstaying his visa. He's undocumented, but John has bought some property in the US, let's say a car, and he's made some great friends. And let's say one of his best friends here is a man named Larry, who is a big gun enthusiast. So him and John go shooting together at the gun range, and they have a good relationship. And so Larry decides to keep many of his firearms in John's car. John doesn't know much about US law, but because he trusts Larry and they have a great relationship, he's okay with it. Not a big deal. He's just using my trunk to store some guns, right? So John keeps Larry's guns in his car, and he seems to be trusting Larry. One day, John is driving from the gun range back to his house, and he's speeding. So he's speeding, let's say the speed limit is 50, and he's traveling at like 70 miles an hour. He's in a big rush to get back home. And the police pull John over. They immediately see that this car is going 20 miles above the speed limit, and they chase him and they pull him over. When the police pulls him over, they notice that John's words are a little bit slurring. So they feel like his speech is irregular, and they have probable cause to believe that he is under the influence of alcohol. So they ask John to take a breathalyzer test, to which he consents. And the police definitely confirm that John is indeed drunk right now. He's under the influence of alcohol. BAC level is far higher than it should be. So then the police then asked to search John's car because they feel like there might be drugs or something else in the car besides alcohol. So John consents because John doesn't know about American law and the rights he has. And he allows the police to search his car because he feels like he's a law-abiding individual and he's got nothing to hide. Common mentality, right? Which I would never recommend, by the way. Never consent to the police searching your vehicle. You have rights. Make sure you use them. The police open up his trunk and they see a bunch of guns, firearms. And they ask John if the firearms are his. John says the truth, which is, no, they're my friends and I'm just keeping them in my car. The police then ask to see the guns. And of course, John, consenting to the search earlier, definitely affirms the police search the vehicle to see if there are any other firearms, and there aren't. And once they inspect the guns, they come to realize that some of these guns don't have a serial number. Larry might have gotten these guns off the black market. We don't know, or maybe he scratched them off himself. Either ways, John is in a lot of trouble because John is in the possession of firearms without a serial number and firearms of typically without a gun license. And remember, John is undocumented too. So that's another issue, being that he's not a US citizen and he's in possession of firearms. Big problem. So the police arrest John. And now instead of recommending to prosecute him through the judicial system, i.e. a trial with due process, they recommend that John gets deported immediately. Now, he's arrested, he's booked in the system, there are charges, but the police decide that it's much easier to deport him than it is to convict him formally through the system. So John is in a bit of a bind. He loves the US. He asked Larry to get him a lawyer, and Larry gets a lawyer to represent him from there. And now his lawyer is telling John that, look, if you get deported, you will not be able to return to this country for at least 10 years. And with your possession, it could likely be denied in general. Your return could be denied in general. John is horrified because he knows that he'll never be able to come back. He loves the US. So what does John do? Well, you have two scenarios. The first scenario is that if the state decided to convict John when he was arrested, then John would not be deported. because based on the due process rights of both US citizens and non-citizens, even undocumented individuals, the government cannot deport any individual if there is an active trial case against them. The second scenario is that there is no trial case, that he's immediately recommended for deportation, and in that case, John has to then rely on immigration law, i.e. deportation defense, in order to stay in the country. And that typically means asylum law, and specifically the specialized variant, CAT defense law, in order to stay in the US. Now, if he can't demonstrate that he qualified for either asylum or CAT asylum, then John is definitely going to get deported. However, let's make the scenario a little bit more interesting. Let's say that the government did decide to prosecute John. Let's say that there was a trial. Or let's say that John feels that his due process rights were violated by the government and he decides to sue the state at the same time. So if you have a scenario like that, it makes it a little bit more interesting, because there's an active trial case going on in the judicial system at the same time as a immigration removal proceeding happening with Eeyore. So in a situation like that, John would be set, and I'll tell you why. While that trial case is going on, John's would definitely not be able to be removed. And the other benefit John would have is that John can litigate the case on both levels, meaning the federal and state level if there are federal and state violations, prolonging his case in the US. If John loses his cases, let's say for trial and appellate, right? He's lost it at the trial level and he appealed and he lost it there. And now he only has one more level he can go to, right? Either the state Supreme Court or the Supreme Court of the United States at the federal level. He's only got one more appeal left. Let's have a scenario like that. In a scenario like that, John would have to file a writ of certiorari or a writ of habeas corpus, which is just a sort of legalese or big law language for asking the Supreme Court to hear his case, i.e. for the writ of certiorari, or for the habeas corpus is for ineffective counsel. So let's say John had a bad experience with the previous lawyer in his trial and appellate cases, and then he wants to ask the Supreme Court for an appeal because he feels that the lawyer did not make an accurate argument based on the law. So in those cases, John would still not be deported or removed because John has so many procedural options to go through for his due process rights before he can be removed. So the reason I'm explaining and I'm even talking about these issues is because procedure has a very big impact in the legal justice system. Many lawyers don't understand, even experienced lawyers don't understand, that the best way to forestall an unfavorable outcome in a case is by using procedure as a strategy in trial. Immigration law tends to be very procedural, much like many other forms of litigation. But unlike many other forms of litigation, there are less due process defenses in immigration law, mainly because immigration law is a civil law. So John, if he was going through the immigration court system for his removal, he would not be able to use criminal evidence against him, or than he might have against the government, for example, if that evidence wasn't entered through the state court system first. So there are a lot of issues pertaining to jurisdiction. There's a lot of issues pertaining to procedure that an experienced immigration lawyer would have to know in order to adjudicate the matter effectively before the government. So the key takeaways, regardless of whether you are a US citizen, a documented or undocumented immigrant, you have due process rights in this country that cannot be violated by the government unless they have probable cause. And it's their burden of proof to show that they have probable cause, not yours. So don't make their job easier by willingly disclosing information about yourself or your property that could jeopardize your case or your freedoms, such as how John did in his immigration proceeding example that I gave earlier. And if you don't know your rights, you can always consult an attorney or a law firm to have an expert work on your case. And remember, while this video is for education and entertainment purposes, it is not an official representation of legal advice. So always remember to do your own research or officially hire an attorney who can do that research for you. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you like the video, feel free to drop a like and subscribe. Thanks, have a good day, and take care. Bye.